I'm not a comic book person. I've not read too many in my life. I don't know how to review one, what you're supposed to look for, what you're supposed to praise. I'm a complete novice to the entire medium. All I know is though of my happy childhood memories of going to the library on the weekend and heading to the comic section and snatching anything that said Batman, Alien or Predator on the cover. I loved flicking through them. Some of them were really good and some were downright weird. Either way, it was something I really enjoyed doing, and I recall finding a comic that said Batman Aliens on the cover with half of Batman's face on the screen and half of a Xenos face on the other merged together to form a single image. I was entranced at the artwork cover and I was completely blown away at the concept of crossing over characters and universes, which was completely alien to me. Even today I have very little understanding of the copyright status of comic book characters and what the restrictions and limitations are between the copyright holders. I think Batman Aliens was the first Batman or Alien comic I had ever read. Whether it was or wasn't, it definitely was the one I had the most fun with when I was a kid. I remember reading it and rereading it endlessly, the sequel too, gazing at specific images that the artist drew and imagining the scenes playing out in my head. I remember one time where I drew the front cover, and I used to be pretty good when I was a kid, and I showed it to my family proudly, who showered it with praise. It was good memories. Anyway, I don't know if Batman Aliens has a reputation, whether it's thought of as great or is famously ridiculed or whatever. For me though, it's always going to remain a childhood favourite, and even rereading it recently, I really enjoyed it. The story involves Batman on a mission in a South American rainforest to locate a missing person, where he unwillingly teams up with a group of mercenaries who are on an investigation of their own. They find a crashed spaceship has become buried under a temple, and exploring the two they come across victims of the aliens' life cycle, both human and not, xenomorph eggs, and eventually of course the creepy creatures themselves, beginning a fight for survival and escape from the perplexing surroundings. The story is pretty simple and straightforward. It's basically mimicking the plot of Aliens, with the discovery of the ship, the fight with the aliens, and then ending with a big bad taking on Batman, which in this story takes the form of a xenomorph that spawned from a crocodile. Retrospectively, it's a little silly, but I remember being mesmerized when I turned the page of the comic as a kid to see that huge monster take up 2 pages all on its own. There are some great shots in the comics, most of Batman looking heroic and brave, striving for success in this hopeless situation. The xenomorphs look powerful, and there are some spooky interior shots and grand establishing ones. The action scenes were well drawn. You could feel the fluidity of it. The snapping of the Xeno jaws, the gunshots of the Marines firing, it all felt very kinetic and engaging. There's one nightmare sequence also where Batman's ultimate nightmare, the death of his parents, is fused with his current nightmare situation. The way I see it, you can do a crossover of Batman and Aliens in 2 ways. The first is to play it straight, exploit the horror elements of the 2 universes and amplify the sense of dread and tension. The second is to acknowledge the absurdity of it all and to go all out batshit insane. Batman Aliens pushes most of the crazy stuff to the sequel, and itself feels grounded and quite realistic for the universe it's set in. I did think the characters were a little bit weak. Batman was characteristically Batman, but the mercenaries felt like caricatures and cliches of your standard 80s action film mercenaries. There was one ultra-religious character who was endlessly quoting the Bible, whose insertion I found a little weird. I mean, would someone like that really be a mercenary, a man killer? There were 2 other expendable characters and a tough-as-nails squad leader who I liked quite a bit, and a female character who I thought was a little too quippy for the extreme situation they were all in. She ends up being the Burke clone that we've seen far too many times of really, and attempts to betray Batman and her crew in order to feed her ambition, and gets her just desserts in doing so. I feel the comic was a good journey for Batman, a learning experience. The character in the comic book was a true and just interpretation of the Caped Crusader we all know. There's a solemn sequence right at the end where he returns to the Batcave after a gruesome alien encounter. After we say hello to Alfred, Bruce sits down at his desk next to the captured dead facehugger specimen. He reflects and he contemplates Bruce's decision not to kill a crocodile that attacked him, saying it was just following its natural instinct. His experience with the mercenaries, his listening of a tape recorded by a doomed alien victim, and the nightmare encounter with the xenomorphs all accumulate to this moment of reflection. Batman decides that the Xenos are not perfect engines of terror or evil as the tape suggested, but like the crocodile he fought, they were just following their nature. But he does acknowledge he did come face to face with evil down there in the rainforest, but the evil of greed, of power, human evil. And then he destroys all the evidence of the Xenos and believes the only real option in the future is ending the creatures if they ever resurface. And the reason is put beautifully. Not because of what they are, because of what we are. It's a magnificent ending to a comic book that could have been so stupid, but instead was pretty sincere and plausible. I'm not really experienced enough with comics to know how good it actually is in comparison to the norm, and therefore rating it is a little difficult, but for sheer enjoyment and the fact that it's a childhood favourite, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.